Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video from Aman Talks NRL SuperCoach. In today's video, we're going to go through the round 5 trade targets, burning questions and hot topics of the week. So if you enjoy the video, do give it a thumbs up. Do please consider subscribing as well to the channel if you haven't already, and let's get straight into it. So firstly, one of the key takeaways I wanted to get heading into round 5 is position changes. So as you can see here, these are a couple of screenshots from the Daily Telegraph's article about players who have their position or will have their positions changed from round 6 onwards. So that's Josh King, Alec McDonald, Jason Taumalolo, Sam Walker and Fletcher Baker. So Josh King and Alec McDonald will both end up having second row forward and front row forward dual eligibility, and the same as well with Jason Taumalolo, which I think is really interesting. Taumalolo has been posting decent scores, and given the lack of options really in the front row forward, it'll be nice to know that we can get someone like Taumalolo in that front row forward spot. So that's definitely a change that I do like. Sam Walker being named at 5'8" is not really a surprise. He's been listed at number 6 for the Roosters since the beginning of the season, and Fletcher Baker also gets 2 RF added to front row forward, although he's not as relevant, but those other ones in terms of Taumalolo and Sam Walker definitely have relevance. Now there were a couple of players who also were up for consideration but didn't end up getting their positions added on. So Talakai potentially could have gotten his centre wing added to his second row forward status, but due to the reasons there, I'm not going to read out that entire excerpt. He wasn't given the centre wing eligibility, but he could get that from the round 12 change. And Angus Crichton coming off the bench, it's some uncertainty whether he's playing in the middle or on the edge, so they decided just to keep it off him. But look, imagine if Crichton got front row forward eligibility, that would really be a game changer. So those are the kind of key takeaways. I think Taumalolo becomes very interesting. Talakai, we're definitely going to be talking a bit more about him. He's a very hot topic of discussion for this week. And I just wanted to address another kind of more broad question before we dive into the kind of key issues. So this is a question coming from my Twitter, which was, holding trades in the early season versus capitalizing on as much cash generation early in the season as possible. Now, my favoritism is to generate as much cash as you can in the beginning of the season, and this year particularly, just with a lot of those overpriced guns, the likes of Turbo, Cleary, Dave Fifita, for example, all of their scores were very, very high. Sorry, not scores. All of their prices were very high due to how big the scoring was last season. So I think cash generation is very important. It's a fine balance, you want to make sure you generate enough cash, but also score enough points as well. So ideally, you pick the guys who have low break-evens, but will also score big. I think the time to hold trades is kind of, you want to trade enough to make sure that your team's kind of well set up, and then you can start saving your trades knowing that you've got a team that's pretty well set up, you've got some decent depth, but at the start of the season, we're still learning a lot. We're trying to address mistakes and things like that, trying to generate cash, so I don't mind going early this season on trades and then saving them kind of midway through the season and then also in the back end of the year as well. Now, the first topic I wanted to get into was actually the cash cows, because a lot of these guys are firming up as the best buys or the biggest buys of the week. So Taylor May to start off with, look, he's got 102 average in 2 games, minus 123 break even. If you don't own him, buy him. Beau Fermor being named in the starting lineup for the Titans is encouraging. He's been a very good early season buy, 67 average with a minus 29 break even. If you're potentially looking at downgrading Dave Fifita to raise money for, say, a Mr. Nathan Cleary, doing a switch to his other Titans back row could be on the cards there. You're saving like 200k. I do think he looks like a good option with that high average, and his base and power has been pretty solid as well. Similar to this guy, Siosifa Talakai. So again, named in the center wing for the Sharks. I didn't see Connor Tracy amongst the 17 or the extended reserves there. So that hopefully means that Talakai, at least for this week and maybe the next couple of weeks, should be okay in that position. The benefit of Talakai is that he's quite versatile. He can play in center. He can also play in the second row forward, and he breaks that many tackles and is that big of a unit. You could probably play him in the middle as well. And he's one of the most traded in players for this week. And if you hadn't watched the highlights of the Sharks last game, you would have seen the amount of tackle breaks he was getting. That's really a feature of his game. Now, going back through the numbers, there's not too many games where he actually played in the centers for us to kind of judge on, has he been a good option in the past. So for example, last season, only twice was he listed in the centers, and he had scores of 32 and then 44. So nothing amazing, but around that there were scores of 88 when he was playing in the second row forward. And then if we go back even further to 2020, he had one game where he was named in the starting center spot and he scored 68. So there's just not really that many games that we can have as a good sample size to say, is he going to keep up this scoring in the center wing? So look, the average is nice, 63. The break even is very low at minus 36. The Sharks do play the Tigers this week. They do play the Storm the week after that, but then after that, the draw is quite good. They do play Manly, but we know that Manly don't have Trbojevic now, so we know generally they tend to kind of slide a little bit in terms of their overall performance when they don't have Tom. So the draw long term for the Sharks is not bad. I don't mind Talakai as a buy in your second row forward, just because, if for example you're sitting with, say, one of those mid-rangers like, even like a Ewan Aitken, think of like an Eli Katoa, maybe even Fifita if you're looking to downgrade to save funds. I don't mind trading the likes of these guys to someone like Talakai because he's going to make a lot of money. And he's just got that potential to be just one of those guys who just stays in the Sharks team because he's such a destructive unit. Sometimes he can get caught out defensively, but as an offensive weapon, he's really on his day. It's quite scary how good he is. And I really don't think he's that bad of a buy. Between Fermor and Talakai, that's a tough call. I think Fermor, you see him more as that kind of long-term option because you know that he's hopefully locked into that back row spot. Talakai, there's some more question marks around the job security. I would say Talakai's got that kind of explosiveness to go big because he can rack up those tackle breaks. Fermor is probably going to be a more steady kind of, 55 to 65 a week. So I guess it kind of depends on your risk appetite, what kind of, what style of scoring do you actually prefer? Do you want to ride the highs and the lows of potentially a Talakai, or maybe just stick solid with someone like a Fermor? I really don't think it's that black and white as to which one is the better option. My personal preference is probably Fermor just for the safety, but I'm more conservative when it comes to kind of, my trade selection. But look, Talakai would be a great cash grab. A little bit of a shame that he wasn't, given that center wing status. But, if you pick him now, he should hopefully get that, if he stays in the center wing spot come round 12, which is obviously still a few weeks away. But look, it definitely will add to his appeal. And look, if you can get him now, he could just be one of those guys who just soars up in price. So it feels like a good week to be buying Talakai. Same with Kula from the Sea Eagles. So we know that Tom Trbojevic is supposedly going to be out for at least kind of 4 to 6 weeks with that knee injury. Kula was named at the fullback spot, which is really nice to see. Now, there could be some late game switching where Ruben Garrick goes from the wing back to fullback, because we saw that Garrick played fullback last season there and was quite good. Now, even Kula on the wing, I don't mind that much. The wingers, we know, are usually the beneficiaries of being on the end of those sweep plays. The minutes is weird, 29 minutes, because he was playing as a utility in the first game that he played. So the break-even's only -6, but he did get a good score last week. So if he gets another decent score this week, you'd expect that break-even to go even further down and the cash rises to be even better. And I think when you've got some underperforming center wings like, Staggs, Cobbo, Aman, Kula, I think, is a good downgrade option, and certainly I'm looking very closely at him, and there's a good chance that I'll be bringing him in this week. I've got two halves here in Schneider and Moses. Now, not necessarily saying like, just trade these guys in to make cash. Hopefully you've already got someone like a Brad Schneider. Again, a -33 break even, so if you are considering like, upgrading him to someone like Nathan Cleary, just bear in mind that, he should still be making some decent cash. He's got some goal kicking about him as well, so if you can potentially squeeze out every dollar out of him, maybe this week's not the right week to be upgrading him. Now, Mitch Moses, though, has been on fire. I think it's worthy to discuss him because of how good he was in that last game against the Dragons. And he started the season pretty well. I wasn't too high on him in the preseason, but he's definitely shown me and proven me wrong. He's got the hot hand at the moment. He's extremely involved in the Eels attack. I don't mind Moses as a trade-in. For me, though, like, I see the primary targets in halfback as like Nico Hines, Nathan Cleary. In my head, that's kind of the combination I want to run to. So if you've already got a Moses, I would not be trading out. I think even for like a Hines, just because it looks like, Moses should be getting some nice cash rises. It looks like the Eels are on form, especially against the weaker opposition, and they do have a lovely draw coming up as well. So Moses for me is a hold, maybe as a buy if you're looking to upgrade, say do a switch from, say, like a Sam Walker to Mitchell Moses. He could be more of a stepping stone to those more expensive guys like a Hines or a Cleary. But overall, just wanted to shout him out because he's had an excellent start to the season. Should be making quite a bit of coin, but also one of those guys who can deliver a lot of points as well. So obviously I had to give a little section here for my fellow friends Staggs and Cobbo. Are they a sell? Look, Staggs, I think, is a sell. I'm pretty set on selling Staggs this week. He's lost some like 50k. Roosters and Panthers in the next 2 weeks. Just haven't seen any signs, from the Broncos that they're going to use him well. So for me, Staggs is an easy sell. Cobbo, look, he's a very easy sell as well, but he's a cheaper price at 282k. So there is an argument, whether to hold him just because you're not going to get much value out of him. In all honesty, I know I slander a lot of these guys on Twitter, for giving me junk scores and me wanting to trade them out. But I think Aman is actually a bigger sell than Cobbo. Aman was named on the bench. If he keeps coming off the bench for 5-10 points, his price is just going to tank and is just going to be an auto emergency nightmare. Whereas someone like Cobbo, he's still being named to start in the team. he just needs to get a couple of tries, 1 or 2 tries, and, the price can start going in the right direction. They do have the Bulldogs in round 7, so, potentially by then, maybe he's got nabbed a couple of tries, or he does nab a couple of tries in that actual game. Maybe the Broncos get their act together. So for me, Cobbo, I know I've been saying he's a massive sell. Personally, I think for my own team, he's actually going to be held this week, and I'm probably going to sell Aman over Cobbo, just because of those reasons I mentioned with Aman, that he's looking more of like an auto emergency nightmare. He's been benched, so obviously the coach has been willing to drop him. So far, Cobbo has kept his place. There has been talk about Cobbo dropping to reserve grade, at least in that situation. If he's completely out of the squad, he won't be an auto emergency nightmare, whereas Aman coming off the bench is just a bit of a headache. So Cobbo, surprisingly, will probably stay in my team this week, but Staggs, he's gone. So another player who's been quite heavily sold this week is Fifita. So a lot of people very frustrated with his performances so far this year. Only averaging 60 when he started the season at 750k, and it's just generally the involvement or lack of involvement that he shows with the Titans that is really, frustrating owners, myself included. Now, I've probably got other priority moves this week in my team, so Fifita is probably going to be a hold for me. I don't think he's the worst hold. He scored, 53 points on the weekend, and as we always say, it seems like he doesn't have to do much, and he still manages to get the points. So you just have to be hopeful, maybe, if you can just crash over for a try, can he just do more, get a bit more involved, he's going to have a big score. It's similar to Staggs. We feel like we've been saying that for the first month of the season. It hasn't happened yet, so I don't begrudge anyone selling Fifita, and especially if you're looking to maintain going with a gun player. So Cam Murray, Papali'i, and someone also asked me specifically about kick out. Is this kick out Zia? I think it was NRL SuperCoach Chat on Twitter, so shout out to you. I think Cam Murray and Papali'i are fantastic upgrades from Fifita. Just the form that they're showing in terms of SuperCoach point scoring. Murray especially, he's been on fire. The base and power of 68 is incredible. Similar with Papali'i of 69. Only thing with Papali'i is that he played 66 minutes on the weekend. He wasn't playing the full 80, and Ryan Madison did come back. So it just gives me some hesitancy whether, Maddo being back affected his minutes. Now, the Eels were very comfortable winners in that game against the Dragons, so part of me also thinks, was it just to kind of give him a little bit of a, an early shower? So I still think he's a good buy. And the fact that you can get him in the front row forward, and if you're someone like, owning Josh King, he should be getting the dual flexible eligibility soon, come round 6. So, you can swap Papali'i to your front row forward if you bring him in this week. So that's one appealing thing about him. Now, Cam Murray, though, is probably my preference just because we're going to touch on it a little bit later. But the Rabbitohs have got a fantastic draw. Don't get me wrong, the Eels also have a great draw, but Papali'i playing on the right side, it feels like he's just slightly at a disadvantage. It feels like the left side of the Eels attack is really where you want to be at, to be getting a lot of those meat pies, which is what he was getting last season. Murray just seems to be getting the attacking stats wherever he is. He's a ball-playing lock, he's playing big minutes, and he's racking up the tackles, and I think he's probably the best replacement for Fifita if you're looking to maintain at that price category. I think Papali'i is a great get if you want to slot him in your front row forward. Now, Kikau, is it his year or not? I think he's just showing us what he's done in the past. Historically, he's averaging around 60. So far, he's averaging 72 because he's had 3 great scores and 1 kind of down score. So it's a bit of a roller coaster with him, which is why I'm not too keen on recommending Kikau as a buy unless you're happy to kind of take a punt on the chance that the Panthers are just going to keep going down his side. He's going to keep benefiting from attacking stats. I usually try to pick guys who don't need to rely on the attacking stats so much, just so I know that I'm going to get less of the bad scores. That does tend to mean, though, I miss out on those really nice high scores, which Kikau can definitely get. I do prefer someone like Cam Murray or Papali'i to him, but I do understand that they're 150k more than Kikau. So Kikau's still not a bad buy. The draw is still quite good for the Panthers, but I'm still not seeing, it's only been 4 rounds. I can't definitively say that this year he's going to absolutely smash it and maintain a 70 average. He might uptick on his average, maybe to 63, 65, but I just don't think he will be maintaining a 72 average, in my own opinion. But I think going on Kikau, you know that you can get some big scores, especially with how good the Panthers are overall as a team. So next up, wanted to talk about the 5'8 guns. So my boy Dylan Brown absolutely smashed it last week and has been doing so well to begin the season. Now, I wanted to address this question just above their heads, which is, what's your thoughts on trading players out a week after just getting them? For example, Munster. Is it worth next week shifting to Dylan Brown? Now, I would say no. I don't think it's worth it with someone like Cam Munster. I don't think overall it's a bad idea. It's not a bad strategy if you want to trade in a player just for 1 week and then take them out. That's not my normal play style. So say, for example, if you bring in a guy for 1 week, he rises 100 10k in cash hypothetically, and he's your stepping stone to a future gun, just doing the one extra trade to kind of bridge that gap, I don't think is a bad use of a trade. It's not my personal style to do that. Ideally, if I'm bringing someone in, I'd be happy to keep them for at least 3 to 4 weeks, I think. So I wouldn't necessarily do a switch of, say, Munster to Dylan Brown. But if you're looking at it as a purely financial move, I don't think it's horrible, because Dylan Brown's now got, I think, back-to-back hundreds in his rolling average. So the minus 44 break even, he should get up to like 700k. Munster, though, his break even's 49, right? And he only just scored 120 the week before. So if you're doing the switch because you're like a bit of a fear of missing out, you want to jump on to Dylan Brown, do you think he's a must-have? Look, I know it's a cop-out answer. I'll try to get both, because I think both of them, if you see the stats below me, they've just got very similar ways of scoring their SuperCoach points, which to me is really appealing. They've both got high base, both very good on the evasive, tackle breaking stats. They're kind of moderately creative, if you want to call it that. They're probably not the most creative players in their own teams. You'd think with the Eels, it's probably Gutherson and Moses. With the Storm, you probably think, it can get shared a lot, but Harry Grant's quite creative. Ryan Pappenhausen is a very creative player as well on those sweep plays. Munster definitely gets a piece of the act, but, it wasn't quite falling for him on the weekend against the Bulldogs. But both of these players have got very good draws. That's the thing. So if you look at Dylan Brown, from round 9, the draw does toughen up, Panthers and then the Roosters. So if you're looking at for some monetary gain, if you jump on him now, you can get a lot of price rises out of him. You can benefit from a good month ahead. And then from round 9, he could be like a stepping stone, maybe to say like a Nathan Cleary via dual players, or maybe you switch back to Cam Munster. But the risk of that strategy is that Munster's also got a good draw coming up as well. And as I mentioned, only just scored 120 the week previous. So it feels a bit knee-jerky to be saying, oh yeah, switch Munster to Dylan Brown. I think Dylan Brown is showing to be a great option. I like the fact that he's got a very good base, so he's not going to give you those really low scores. Say, for example, like Cody Walker, the base is so much lower compared to these other two, as you can see in the stats below me. But I wanted to discuss Cody Walker as well, because he's got a break-even of 67, which he can definitely match, but the run for the Rabbitohs is really, really nice. Only one tougher opposition in the Sea Eagles in round 8, but Tom Trbojevic might not even be back by then. And you've got the Dragons, Bulldogs, Tigers, Broncos, Warriors. Now, Cody, he hasn't shown the upside as what he had from last year. We're already seeing some chat about tweaking the rules to try to get our star players back in the game more. Look, that potentially just might mean that the players like Cody Walker go back to what they scored in 2021. I personally, though, with Dylan Brown, I'm sticking solid with him. Obviously, I'm not going to be looking to move him on, but trying to fill in that second 5'8" spot, deciding between Munster and Walker for the price saving. Look, Cody Walker could be like 530k potentially next week. And then you look at that draw in comparison to Munster, you'd say, yeah, that draw's better overall. You'd probably say the Storm are a better team. But the Rabbitohs have had a very tough start to the year, but they were in the games with the Storm. They, very comfortably beat the Roosters, very close loss to the Broncos, and they were quite, in that game as well with the Panthers. So you'd think with this nice draw coming up, they could absolutely kick on, and Cody Walker could be the guy to go for. You've got one solid option in, say, like a Dylan Brown or Munster, and then one kind of high upside play in Cody Walker. So that's how I kind of see the 5'8" position at the moment. I think, especially with the halfback as well, it seems like at the moment, going heavy in your halves and 5'8" is a really good strategy to target a lot of points. You can afford to go a bit lighter in your second row forward, even your centre wing. We've got cheap options like Targo, Taylor and May, who are just delivering mass points. And I feel like going heavy on your halves, going heavy on your fullbacks seems at the moment a good way to target a lot of points. And, guys like Dylan Brown are fairly low owned. Cody Walker's going to be low owned as well. And someone like Nathan Cleary, his ownership's probably going to skyrocket soon. But yeah, I kind of feel going heavy on the 5'8" and the halves is a good strategy. In terms of switching Munster for Brown, only if you're aware that it's kind of for a monetary gain would I do it. But look, if you're trying to think that Dylan Brown's a better option than Munster, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think they're both very similar in the way that they scored their points. So I'm thinking in my own head, what would be my ideal 5'8" combo? Look, it's hard to say no to Dylan Brown at the moment, the way he's going. So ideally, I'd probably say Dylan Brown and Munster, just because I do prefer that higher base player. But if Cody Walker gets down to a really nice, appetizing price, and with that draw coming up, I think there's very easily a good argument for having a Dylan Brown and a Cody Walker combination as well. Munster and Walker, look, you can't go wrong with any of these three in all honesty. So have mentioned already in the video, but Tom Trbojevic looks out for about 4 to 6 weeks. So you definitely want to be selling him, trying to find the best replacement. And so, look, who do you go for? Now, Nicho Hynes, I'm going to assume that people have already got him because I think he was such a hot property for the first few weeks of the season. Now, I did recommend that if you wanted to sell Turbo, Hynes was the best option. I've changed my thinking on that just because I think if you really do want Nicho Hynes, we started to see the fullbacks do really well in the last couple of weeks. So I think Hynes, try get him into your halfback if you can. And I think going with two gun fullbacks like Tedesco and Pappenhausen, look, that's been my combination all season. I'm very happy with that. I still think it's my preferred combo, Tedesco and Pappenhausen. Both have got very nice draws coming up. You see Tedesco, has got the Broncos, the Warriors, the Dragons, the Bulldogs and the Titans. They're all teams that can concede quite a few points. Now, Pappenhausen's draw on paper isn't as easy, but the Storm just seem to be that team that can score massive points. And the fact that his goal kicking is just insane. 193 points he scored. Absolute legend. Thank you, Pappenhausen. So his price is going to be skyrocketing as well. So look, if you don't own Pappenhausen and you're selling Turbo, he's the guy that I would 100% be recommending. And I'll try to partner him with Teddy. I'm still a believer in Teddy doing well. It looks like he's getting more back to his best as well from a Supercoach standpoint. You can maybe consider a couple of more pod options in Clint Gutherson and Latrell. Gutherson for me is just lacking that kind of upside that we're seeing from, say, a Pappenhausen or a Tedesco. Now, Latrell is probably that other option that does have the upside just because he is goal kicking. But I feel like because of the amount of quality options at fullback, Tedesco, Pappenhausen, etc., I feel like I'd rather go for a Cody Walker instead. Now, what's interesting though, looking at Latrell's stats, is the creativity score. So just in the table below me, 24 that he's averaging. It's actually higher than Cody Walker's so far this year. So I just wonder though, is Latrell actually taking on more of that responsibility? Part of that could just be due to the fact that the fullbacks usually get the try assist points on the end of those sweep plays. So Latrell probably is going to be a bigger beneficiary of the Rabbitohs draw, you could argue. But it feels easier to go for Walker when there's so many other good fullback options. But look, if you're looking to take a pod option, I think Latrell, look, you can wait a week. It's 102 break even. But look, even as I say that, the Dragons, they've been conceding quite a few points. With the goal kicking, you can see Latrell putting on a ton in this game as well. So if you've already got, say, Pappenhausen, and you're looking to, say you've already got a few Roosters options, maybe you've got a Sam Walker, maybe a Daniel Tupou, and you think maybe you want to diversify, go for a Rabbitohs attacker, going from Turbo to Latrell could be a nice pod play. But if you're looking to go the more kind of higher ownership, less risky move, I'd probably say just stick with a Tedesco Pappenhausen combo. Try to get Hynes up into your halfback if you can. So in the next section, I kind of wanted to discuss Nathan Cleary because look, if you're someone who's selling Turbo down to another cheaper option, you should be freeing up some funds and you could turn those funds into Nathan Cleary. Last week, I was an advocate for waiting on Nathan Cleary just for last week because it was the Rabbitohs and they are a tough opposition. But now I'm looking at that draw and I'm seeing his break even of 160. I think if you asked me in round 2, I would have said no. No one can reach that 160 point score. But just the last few weeks, we have seen players go big like we did last season. And Cleary is just that type of Supercoach player who can hit 160 because if you see in the charts below me, 2021 averages, look, it's a nice spread of points. He gets his points in a variety of ways, but the sheer number is just insane. 26 base, 31 he was averaging and scoring, 38 in creativity, 15 in evasive. He's averaging 110 last year and he was scoring 200 plus last year as well. Now 2022, the reason I showed that, even though it's only a 1 game sample size, it was more just to see the split of points. And it's not that different. It's just the numbers obviously a lot lower because it was his first game. For example, I think the base is the most telling number. A base of 10 compared to 26 last year. Cleary is quite a good defender and he does make quite a few tackles. So I just wonder if the base was lower because he's easing himself into the game because, it's his first game after quite a lengthy time away from the game. I don't think that really worries me though because the base is not the biggest proportion of his points. He gets his points from try assists, goal kicking, scoring tries himself as well. And when you've got the Bulldogs, the Broncos coming up in the next 2, the Raiders and then the Titans, it's mighty tempting. It is mighty tempting. I think if you are in that position where you can sell Turbo, raise funds to get to Cleary, I would be on board, I think, with actually buying Cleary this week because he's a serious captaincy option as well against the Bulldogs. If you've got Schneider, I know I said that you could continue to wait on him and make money, but this is kind of those times when you have to decide, is it the cash generation or is it the points? And the points against the Bulldogs, I can see 140, honestly, from Cleary. So if he scores 140, he's only just getting below his break even. His price won't drop too much. And one thing to note, his score of 34 was only his first game. That's going to drop out of his rolling average the fastest. So say if against the Bulldogs and the Broncos he scores 120, 140, that game of 34 is the least relevant in determining his future price. And so the fact that he's got these two nice games in rounds 5 and 6 makes me think that I really want to jump on Cleary this week if I can. I don't think I can though, so I'm very jealous of any of you who can. But yeah, like say if you've already got Hines and say a Sam Walker, if you can find the funds Sam Walker up to, a Nathan Cleary, I'd be a very big supporter of that. You could also fund that, say, from Dave Fifita, maybe via Jules down to like a cooler. You're freeing up like 500k there. That could be the way that you get up to someone like Nathan Cleary. I probably can't do it this week. I'm very jealous of those who can. So in this section, I'm going to be talking about the center wing targets. Now, the way that I've kind of built this is I've mapped out the 7 to 9 players who ideally, if I had no salary cap issues, these would be the kind of guys I'd be targeting to fill out my center wing. And when I like doing this exercise because then it makes me think, all right, so I know that guy I want that guy. And then I start thinking, okay, which of those guys should I prioritize first, etc. So Tago and May, I think, are very self-explanatory. The way that the Panthers are playing on their left edge, they're both nice and cheap. Those two, like Taylor May, I think is an amazing buy this week. Absolutely locked into my starting kind of center wing. Now, I've got Dane Gagai there. He is very expensive. He's 640k, but if I didn't have any salary cap constraint, he'd be there because he's averaging 77 and his base is really high. And the Knights are still looking very solid as an overall team. So Gagai would probably be in there. He is a little bit harder though to target just because he has that high price tag. Everyone else I'm going to show here are cheaper. So for example, Tupou and Manu. The reason I've got both of them is that I feel like it's a bit of a 50-50 call between the two of them. Tupou is probably going to be your more steady option who's going to, guarantee you like 55 to 65 points a week because he's got good base. Playing on the wing just means he's got that ability to get more tries. Someone like Manu though, similar to say like a Kickout, he's going to be a bit more of a roller coaster. He'll have those games where, playing in the centers, he doesn't get that much involvement, but then he showed last week what he can do. Scored a double, he set up a try as well. He's just that kind of player who can go massive in a game. So I think because of the Roosters' nice draw, I would like to try get a Roosters backline player in there. Billy Smith could be an option, but he's not shown at the moment that he's got the upside or the high average of either of these two, and he should be back in round 6, so I'm still holding Billy Smith as well. Now the other kind of bench center wings, if you want to call it that, I think Beau Fermor. So it kind of looks at that second row forward who you can slot into your center wing. So someone like Ewan Aiken also fits the bill, but I think Fermor has shown more than Aiken this season so far. He is cheaper as well, and he looks like he's got that better chance of getting attacking stats. So someone like Fermor I think would be a really nice target in my center wing as well. Now Xavier Coates, I was very low on Xavier Coates in the preseason just because I didn't like his base. I thought there wouldn't be much upside with him. Him actually being switched to the right side for the Storm seems like it's paying dividends. Him playing on the right, it seems like him and Pappenhausen are forming quite a nice combination where they'll do like a cutout to Coates. He's that quick that he can just burn his man, opposite man, and then he has that ability to then offload back in field to like a Pappenhausen in support. And so with that, you're getting Coates getting like a line break, getting like a try assist, racking up a lot of points. Obviously, he can also score a lot of points himself via tries too. Minus 20 break even, so he will make some money. I think you just have to realize that with Coates, there's going to be some days where he gets low scores, but he has shown enough that I think is worthy of a trade-in. And just the fact that you can get a piece of the Storm backline, I think is enough reason to want to get him into your center wing. Now the final spot, I've tried to kind of frame this as like your kind of good base center. So you can see how I've tried to kind of structure this whole section here. So it's a bit of a 50-50 between Zach Lomax and Campbell Graham. I've highlighted the pair of these in past videos. Campbell Graham has had a really nice base and power average so far this year, the total average of 60, but he's got a break even of 56, so I don't think his price is going to move that much. And as I highlighted with Cody Walker, Rabbitohs draw coming up is fantastic. So Graham is definitely a consideration. He's probably going to be, you're getting a piece of a better team than say the Dragons, for example. The reason I've just shown Lomax here is that he just tends to still get points even when his team gets beaten badly because he's goal kicking. So you kind of want to take a punt on him potentially if you think, if the Dragons have a good day, he should hopefully score, like 100 plus. I do think that Lomax has got the slightly higher upside. I think Graham's probably got, maybe the slightly higher floor, but sometimes Graham just gives you scores of like 30, 35. I feel like he can be a bit frustrating as an own, but look, he's looking pretty decent, like definitely better than from last year. So I think it is a tough call between the two. I'm not 100% on it. I always have a slight bias for Lomax, so I'd probably just say Lomax for that reason. But Campbell Graham is definitely a consideration. But these are my overall kind of center wing targets. If I'm trying to build like my perfect center wing.
Some other considerations I've got below me as well. So Dom Young could be a nice kind of cheaper option than say a Dan Gagai just playing outside of him. Will Penasini has still been okay as a cash cow, scored well on the weekend. Just playing in the right centre doesn't seem to benefit him that much for the Eels, but still is someone that we'll probably keep in our teams for, the medium term. And then also Stephen Crichton. Now Crichton, his scores are probably going to dip just a little bit now that he's lost goal kicking, but he still scored 64 on the weekend, and it's just getting a piece of the Panthers backline because they look so dangerous. There's no issue having Tago, May and Stephen Crichton in there, if you want to go for a more pod option. So overall, those are kind of my thoughts on the best centre wing targets out there. Now, I'll quickly also bounce back to the Roosters watch because even though I discussed them last week, I think it's nice to have a bit of a slightly updated thinking. My opinion has changed a little bit more on Sam Walker. I said he was a hold last week. I do think he is a sell, just because you've got so many other good halfbacks going around, like Moses is proving to be a great option. Cleary coming back for all those reasons was looking very enticing. Nico Hines, he had a bit of a down week, but I'm sure he'll bounce back in the coming weeks as well. So Walker and Cleary, I think they're sells in my eyes. Didn't score that well in a nice matchup against the Cowboys, where the Roosters did actually score quite a few points. Teddy, I think, is a fine hold and even a good buy if you're looking to sell Tom Trbojevic. Tupou and Manu, I highlighted in that centre wing section. I do think they are good purchases as well. And Billy Smith, I think, is probably going to be okay to hold. He's out for round 5, but it looks like he should be in contention for round 6. He's just battling a bit of a foot injury. So personally, he's not my biggest weak link at the moment, so I'm probably going to be holding him. And I'm just hoping that, look, if he comes back in round 6, he's got the Warriors, Dragons, Bulldogs and Titans in the next 4 weeks. I'm just hopeful that playing on the wing, he hopefully gets a chance of getting some tries and getting that price moving in the right direction. So we'll take a look at the market activity, the top trades out and the top trades in. I've tried to speak about quite a few of these players, so hopefully I don't have to go through everyone again in detail. But on the trade outs, Talatau Moan, I agree. For the reasons I mentioned with the Staggs and Cobbo section, I do actually think he's the biggest sell than someone like Selwyn Cobbo, but it doesn't surprise me that Staggs is on there, Selwyn Cobbo is on there. So yeah, I think they're all worthy of getting the flick, but Amon probably is a more priority sell than someone like a Cobbo. Tom, for me, is an easy sell because of the injury. Dave Fifita, I don't necessarily think is such a massive sell, but if you're funding cash growth, like say a Talakai, I do like that as a trade-in. Fermor as well. If you're going down cheap to Kula via duels and then getting in someone like Nathan Cleary, I can't argue with that. It's a very nice looking move. Terrell Sloan has been dropped, so yep, is looking a sell. Bullimore 18th man, a sell. Hamiso Tabuai Fido, I think it's about a 3 to 4 week injury, 3 to 6 week injury, so he's also a sell. Coruscant just hasn't quite shown in the past couple of weeks. He started off well, but at 498k, I think there's enough scope to say you might as well just try upgrade to someone like a Harry Grant if you can. Now, Peta Hiku, I wanted to speak about a little bit because he is actually in my own team. So he hasn't had the cash growth that I hoped for. He scored 41 on the weekend though, not doing much. So the floor is still pretty nice. I'm personally going to hold because I don't think he's my weak link. But I think someone did ask me about, is Hiku a sell? I think it's a sell if, for example, you've had enough of the price rises and you're doing a move to say maybe like a Beau Fermor or switch to a Talakai. They're probably going to be better cash generators than someone like Hiku. He had a nice first 2 weeks, but we just quite haven't seen it in the last couple of weeks. So I don't think Hiku's the worst sell. For my own team though, I've got more priorities, so I think he's going to stay in my team for the future. Now looking at the top trades in, Taylor May, if you're not one of those 19,986 players who haven't yet traded him in, get on the app right now and trade him in. He's a must buy this week because that break even is just ridiculous. He's going to make bulk cash. Kula, I think, is a good buy, named at fullback. There's a chance for him to be named on the wing in the final team list, but I still think playing on the wing, he's okay as an option. Should hopefully be at the end of some sweet plays. Talakai, I think, is a good buy. Pappenhausen, yep, if you're selling Turbo to Pappenhausen, I cannot fault that. Now, Grant, I haven't spoken about that much in this video, but my opinion is pretty clear. I do think that he is the best hooker in the game to go for. He's got a break even of around 20, so he will go up in cash. Now, if you're trying to prioritize, say, like Harry Grant or Cam Munster, because of the low break even, and I just think he's such a standout in that hooker spot, whereas Munster, he has got some competition in the likes of Walker and Dylan Brown. I do think that Grant is a bigger trade and target than, say, like a Cam Munster this week. Joey Manu I like as a buy, but my personal opinion, are probably more swaying towards like a Daniel Tupou, but I can see why he's so heavily traded in. He just scored 118 points, and he does also have a lower break even than Tupou. Dylan Brown and Moses looking on fire. I do think that they are good trade-in targets as well, as is Beau Fermor and Xavier Coates for reasons I mentioned previously. Now, taking a look at the round 5 captaincy. So I personally don't think I'll be able to do any kind of vice captain loophole business this week, just because a lot of those cheaper players do play earlier in the week. But at the moment, my thinking is vice captain Pappenhausen and then captain Hines. For Hines, I like the matchup. It's West Tigers at home. He had a bit of a blip last week, but prior to that, he was absolutely killing it. Still got a season average of 85. So for me, Hines is a pretty safe captain option. You could also captain Pappenhausen, but they are playing away, and it is Canberra, who can be okay defensively, but the Storm can also pile on the points. Shouldn't forget Tedesco, playing against the Broncos, who last season were, I think, conceding the most points to fullbacks. They were right up there. And so Tedesco is definitely also a worthy consideration at vice captain, bearing in mind that you can only pick between Tedesco and Pappenhausen. For me, I just edge it to Pappenhausen just because of the goal kicking. It just adds, like 15, 20 points to a score on a good day. And that's just something that Tedesco can't do. As you would have seen by his goal kick attempt, he can't kick him like Pappy. Now, Cam Murray and Mitchell could also be considerations. St. George at home, Dragons have been conceding a lot of points, but I personally am swaying towards the fullback and the halfback. I feel like that's where the upside is. And then you can see, Moses is there as a bit of a pod option. I mean, if you captained Moses last week, you'd be laughing. The Titans do concede a lot of points. And so I think Moses, we saw just even a few weeks ago, the game between the Titans and the Eels was a really high point scoring affair. So Moses, goal kicking, could do well. But I do think it's between Teddy and Pappenhausen as vice or captain. And then for a later in the week option, probably Nico Hines. Or if you're bringing in Nathan Cleary, do you just captain him away to the Bulldogs? If I was bringing in Cleary this week, I think I'd be captaining him, because it's just the matchup. The fact that he's low owned, it could just be such a good move on paper that you just get bulk points. But either way, if you don't captain him, you should still be benefiting from the points because he's still going to be low owned. But if you just want to go, double down, I don't mind. Captain Cleary, that was one of the mantras from last season and it seemed to work out. So maybe it works out for you in round 5 this week. Now, a quick shout out to my group league as well. The code is just below me. So Andrew top scored for round 4 with 1,534, which is an insane score. Sitting inside now the top 10,000. So a great rank to be in at the start of the season. Now, looking at the top 5, we've got Shots, Mariah, James, Spencer, and Louis, all doing fantastically well in the overall rankings. I mean, the top 4 are all sitting in the top 100. They all had very nice scores last week. And then Louis in the 194th spot. So in this last little bit of the video, I'll just be quickly talking about my team and what I'm looking to do for this week. So at the moment, as I discussed, I've got the captaincy on Nico Hines and I've got the vice captaincy on Pappenhausen at the moment. So just going through my team in terms of say reserve selections. So as you can see, taking out Fanul Blake last week has meant my front row forward is quite light. I've got Josh King starting at the moment just for the fact that he is starting. And then I've got Max King as reserve. He punched out another 41, which for the time being at his price, I'll take in the front row forward. I could play Chris Randall, but he did play elevated minutes due to the fact that Tyson Frizzell had an injury and there was a bit of a mix-up with rotation. So not a mix-up, but he got to play extra minutes. Just not sure if that's going to happen again this week. So I don't have confidence again in reserving Chris Randall. I've got Fifita, Isaiah Yeo, and Targo in my second row forward. Targo being in my second row forward is not ideal, but the way that he's scoring at the moment, I can put him anywhere and he'll give me good points. I've got Tuolagi against the Sharks and Aiken as other reserves, and then Tedesco. One thing I have thought about is potentially reserving Lachlan Ilias. He had a pretty good game last week and is versing a good opponent in the Dragons, who do concede a lot of points. So I am thinking potentially maybe taking the reserve off either one of Tuolagi or Max King and putting on an Ilias. I tend to favour the forwards in this kind of situation if I can, just because they're usually a bit safer. Tuilagi, though, has had a couple of injury concerns, so I'm not sure with him. I might switch to Ilias. I'll post on my YouTube page and Twitter when I finally decide that. But that's one early thought I'm thinking with reserves. Maybe putting it on Lachlan Ilias. Now, in terms of trades, so there's a few issues with the team. So having Targo up in second row forward is not great, but I think he has to stay there for the time being. Aman is an issue, Cobbo is an issue, Staggs is an issue, Hiku I'm not happy with, so I feel like I want to make changes in my centre wing. So Staggs out feels good, don't get me wrong, that feels like a nice play this week. I'm done with him. In comes Taylor May, probably the most obvious trade I think I've ever had to decide on a Tuesday, or you know what, even Monday. I decided Monday morning that was going to be happening. Taylor May has to come in this week for me. That's 247k that I'm freeing up. Now, if I want to sell Aman, I've got 511k to play with. So if I just sort out the players by the averages. So I can't quite afford, I think, a Tupou or a Joey Manu. They're a little bit out of my price range. So yeah, Tupou is about 568k. I'm probably not looking to do a trade boost this week. So I could bring in Cooler and free up a lot of money. What I could also do alternatively though, if I don't want to free up that money, I can maybe sub down Targo into my second row forward. Maybe I could get a bit of a cash grab there with someone like a Bo Fermor or maybe a Talakai. You know, those are also considerations that I've thought of. You know, say for example, I bring in a Talakai, that leaves me with about 77k in the bank. I'm just trying to think though of building a bank just to try to build some funds. So I think for me, the decision with my second trade this week is either to bring in someone like a Talakai and a Fermor, or instead bring in someone like Cooler and raise funds. So say for example, if I took out Talakai, bring Targo back up to the second row forward, and then say I brought in someone like a Cooler. So let's just filter for Manly, easier to find it that way. And then if I brought him in there, that gives me 336k in the bank. So with 336k, what it could just mean is that next week, hypothetically, maybe what I could do is maybe Dave Fifita out for another cheaper second row forward, maybe a Bo Fermor or a Talakai. The only issue with that is their price will go up quite a bit. So I'm just not quite sure how much money I'm going to make out of that. So that's why I'm considering maybe doing the Talakai move this week. I'll be keen to see what you guys think as well in the comments below. Or what I could do next week is Dave Fifita down to just a cheap second row forward, and then maybe with that funds, do like Brad Schneider up to Cleary. Now at the moment, Schneider I'm guessing is going to get to about 300k, so I'm going to need like 650k. So I'd have to trade Dave Fifita down to like a 350k second row forward. So Brodie Jones is someone I've thought of, but it just means that my second row forward is going to be really, really light, and I'm just going to be really heavy with like Hines and Cleary. And it's still not fixing my center wing, which I still think is a bit It's not ideal. So I'm still a bit iffy if I want to actually bank all of this funds when it still means I'm going to have to do mass downgrades to get someone like Nathan Cleary. Or if instead of Cooler, I maybe just go for someone like a Talakai or a Fermor, get Targo or Aiken down to my get Targo or Aiken down to my center wing, and then bring in someone like a Talakai or a Fermor. So that's what I'm thinking at the moment. I'm not really locked into that second move yet. Aman probably will go, but as you can see, there's a few options that I could go with, but 100% Staggs is going and Taylor May is coming in. I'll post later in the week my kind of final trade thoughts. They do seem to change quite a bit, but this is what I'm currently thinking at the moment. I'm going to end the video here as well, so hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Do give it a thumbs up if you did, and do please subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content throughout the 2022 season. And I'll see you all in the next video.